right, welcome back to Statement Piece. So today's episode is about the politics of fur and outerwear. First, we'll start with current events.
Yes. So our very first current event is concerning the new Euphoria special. Both Sita and I are fans of Euphoria, if you listen to our previous Euphoria episode. And we watched the part 1 of 2 special episodes that are serving as an interim between season 1 and 2. Otis, what did you think?
Well, I thought it was interesting how they referenced a lot of current events and issues in today's world without blatantly talking about them.
Yeah.
Like, the nature of it almost was like listening to a podcast.
Well, I am a fan of those.
And our next current event is that Elliot Page, who is 33, the Oscar-nominated star of Juno and X-Men and Inception and Umbrella Academy, recently announced that he is transgender in a statement that he posted on Twitter and Instagram.
Also, we wanted to highlight an interesting piece published by The New Yorker called How Dating During a Pandemic is Like Being in a Jane Austen Novel. And I just thought it had some interesting parallels. For instance, it's a long, drawn-out affair composed of public meetings. The main characters lead domestic lives. You regularly inquire about the health of each other's family members, and you take many brisk walks.
Our last current event is brought to you by the New York Times, and it is basically about how President-elect Joe Biden on Sunday, December 1st, announced an all-female White House communications staff, and Jennifer Psaki, a veteran of the Obama administration, will be the most visible role as the White House press secretary. All right, well, let's get into today's discussion about the politics of fur and outerwear. It's interesting because fur has a really long history. So I found this article from Fashionista named Fashion History Lesson, The Real Story Behind Fake Fur. Whether for saving money or saving animals, faux fur reflects the current state of the fashion industry. And this was published in 2018. And it's interesting because the article talks about the history of faux fur and actually how in the past it was seen as a very cheap and it wasn't socially accepted, I guess, because it was seen as like a wealth and almost like power symbol to be able to afford fur, especially in the colder temperatures. There was an article from 1899 in Harper's Bazaar that warned readers that, quote, at all times imitation fur is a dangerous investment. And this was also in an article from Vogue in 1912 that said fabric fur is, quote, only a substitute for fur and will not be largely used by fastidious women. But the article goes into how fur has its long-standing history all the way back to ancient Egypt and then moved towards the noble elite in Europe and specifically the United Kingdom, and then afterwards became almost this de facto look for Hollywood stars and trophy wives in the early 1900s. The shift from this whole desirable commodity to actually a target of animal rights activism was around the 1970s, and this was because there was this whole Endangered Species Act in 1973 and consisted of a lot of anti-fur protests, which then also led to the creation of PETA, which is the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals. In this article, they also bring up, what are your thoughts?
Well, I thought it was an interesting contrast to another Vox article that I found called The Race to Make the Warmest Winter Clothes by Chavi Lieber, but it talks about Canada Goose versus Montclair and how people are continuing to expect the very best from their products. And obviously Montclair and Canada Goose both use animal products, even though we live in a society where animal rights is at the forefront of a lot of discourse. In it, Edward Hertzman, the founder and president of the trade publication Sourcing Journal, states consumers today expect technical attributes to their garments, and that means winter clothes should be able to function in extreme climates. So this means that people are seeking out companies like Montclair and Canada Goose, and they were able to rise in status, potentially because they were providing this top-notch care, and the idea that you have this high-tech product is something that consumers are looking for in 2020 when tech is so essential to everything that we're doing. And because of companies like Montclair and Canada Goose, I think that there will always be this pressure against PETA and their mission. Even as people are becoming more ethical consumers, people still want this high-tech product. And then a lot of people could contest this and say that they could use fake substitutes. But Berkowitz of Norwegian Wool, another company similar, said, we've looked into synthetic fabrics that say they are as authentic and as warm as down, and they just aren't. The truth is that the alternatives don't have the same results. Synthetic down doesn't have the same effects in the form of insulation. When we're selling a premium product, we're not going to compromise because we want to give the customer the warmest option out there. So I think the consumer faces the dilemma of having the most premium high-tech product versus having a sustainable product.
Yeah, I agree completely. And also, I feel like these high tech, high performance products also last longer. And I know, like, I was having this discussion with a friend today who recently got her Canada Goose repaired, and having kind of that warranty system where you know you're paying this premium, but then it'll last for so many years because in the case that it does get run down or there is some like wear and tear to it, they will fix it for you. And now she's looking at buying another coat and she is leaning towards Canada Goose again because of that aspect. But I also think like the whole concept of these winter coats such as Canada Goose and Montclair, like as much as they are high performance, when they are using these really high quality, high price materials, they become status symbols. For someone to be able to wear a Canada Goose, like you know that they're willing to dish out that much money to afford an item such as that.
Right. In that article that you mentioned by Fashionista, it talked about how the evolution of fur as a status symbol originated, as you said, as far back as ancient Egypt, but especially in the 90s, it became seen as a symbol of Hollywood and affiliated with being a Hollywood starlet. And I did a lot of market research on Montclair and Canada Goose for an internship that I did in summer 2018, where I had to give stock pitches on these companies and compare them. And Canada Goose rose to fame in the same way. It's because in the same way, in the sense that it was affiliated to Hollywood, because it wasn't necessarily the gaudiness of fur coats that was going on in the 90s. But what happened with Canada Goose is that people were seeing paparazzi pictures of stars wearing it while they were on set. And that is what Business Insider predicts made Canada Goose a large brand. And it describes this in the Business Insider article, how 59-year-old Canadian sportswear manufacturer convinced regular people to wear $800 Arctic parkas. And it's by Dennis Green. And it's kind of interesting because Canada Goose has been in existence since 1957, it says, since its inception as Metro Sportswear by entrepreneur Sam Tick. So it's been in the market for a really long time, but the Hollywood cachet and the factor of it being affiliated with this off-duty actor type was viewed as something with greater value than a sponsored post because they were doing it without being asked to. And it describes there were movies like National Treasure, which had shots in really cold places, Game of Thrones, The Danish Girl, they all had scenes in snow and the actors were wearing Canada Geese in their downtime.
Well, in that aspect, it makes sense, right? Because it's more so for utility rather than just the fashion of it. Because it's not, I mean, in my opinion, it's not a particularly aesthetically pleasing coat, but it is one of the warmest. That's for sure.
Yeah, but I think it's still the Hollywood affiliation. Like people see it as, oh, if Daniel Craig is wearing it, or if Kate Upton is wearing it on the cover of Sports Illustrated in Antarctica, then it must be considered high class. And then another part of the market research that I did of Montclair versus Canada Goose is that Canada Goose is just at the right price point where upper middle class and maybe even middle class people would see it as a worthy option, but Montclair is almost too expensive for middle class people to purchase it. So Canada Goose is in a better market position because Montclair just makes it too elite.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I also think Montclair has more of a position within the fashion industry. Like they've had collaborations with a lot of different designers. And I think in that aspect, they've also had, I remember they had the high fashion, it was called Montclair U or Genius U, I think. And they had a collaboration between Montclair and these artisans to design these like puffer gowns, basically. And I think in that aspect, a good amount of the market does not consider Montclair a worthy investment or accessible because it is still in that, as Anna Gray said in our last episode, like proper fashion.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking about more recently where fur has started trending, and I feel like I have you seen that green sweater that has a furry collar and furry ends of sleeves?
Yeah, by House of Sunny.
What is the product?
It's just synthetic.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but I think that goes back to what's seen as trendy now, where I think a lot of trends are circling back. And that was
Yeah.
definitely one in the past where you have those exaggerated sleeve cuffs.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because there are fashion houses that have vowed to go fur free. For example, Prada decided to go fur free in 2020, according to this CNN Style article that was published in 2019. And basically, Prada had announced that it'll stop using fur in all of its products and designs beginning in February 2020. And this applied to all of the Prada Group's brands, which includes Miu Miu, Churches, Car Shoe, and Prada itself. And so this was going to start happening after spring and summer of this year. And so basically, they did this as a collaboration with the Fur Free Alliance as this vow and commitment to innovation and social responsibility. Like, do you think Prada taking this commitment is really a big feat on going fur free and seeing fashion move to a more fur free world?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so because they're already taking steps. And once one big fashion house does it, I think it begs the question, if this one has the capacity to do it, then why don't others?
Mm-hmm.
And they can still be successful. So I think it definitely is moving in that direction. But I always wondered why people would turn away from fur if there are options to get fur without harming the animals necessarily, like things like sheepskin or like baby sheepskin. I think you can get in a somewhat ethical fashion. So I was looking at this blog called Good on You, and there's one article called How Ethical Is Fur by Madeline Hill. And it talks about how it actually is definitely unethical, which I guess isn't that much of a surprise. But I was just thinking about why people would want to go completely fur free as opposed to just ethical sourcing of fur.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess if you have ethical sourcing of fur, there's little accountability to assure that. And then people will just want to move towards unethical sourcing of fur. But this article just speaks about how animal skin will decompose and rot unless it's treated with toxic chemicals. So aside from animal harm, it's a really chemically polluting to the
Mm-hmm.
environment to treat fur. And also there's climate change impact because things like 1 kilogram of mink fur is 5 times higher than that of wool. And wool is the best scoring textile in a life cycle assessment conducted by CE Delft, an independent research organization. But either way, there's just a lot of land, food, and water consumption involved that result in carbon emissions.
Well, I think there does have to be kind of a cost benefit analysis, because if you think about materials like fur or leather, those are materials that are still going to last longer, right? Which may be a better result than buying from fast fashion where those items are only going to last for a little time or going to get worn and you're going to have to get rid of them really quickly. It
Mm-hmm.
also, when you were talking about the ethical fur farming, I guess it reminds me of the food industry. The same thing can be said about food. Yes, you can have ethical chickens or eggs or whatever it may be, but that's only to a certain extent. And then also, how much regulation of that is there really? And with that, it's like, okay, if everyone decided to go vegan, sure, but that's a hard ask.
I'm looking at a WWD article that says what the fur debate, what designers say. And they also talk about faux fur and that idea. Michael Kors said, ongoing fur free now. I've been thinking about it for quite a while. I thought faux furs we do on the Michael line were fun, and I love the texture and exuberance of them. But on collection, I always want things to have a level of artisanal workmanship, something that takes it to a higher level.
Mm-hmm.
So faux furs were strictly fun and they didn't feel luxurious. So we worked for quite a while to rethink how you look at faux fur to be able to use it in a more artisanal way. So I guess it's also a creative challenge to not use fur.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm trying to think of ways, like, how would it realistically change? Like, I know a lot of celebrities kind of do campaigns with PETA and stuff like that, but I don't know if that really creates that much change. And I think about celebrities like Khloe Kardashian. I'm pretty sure she's worn fur or leather since doing the PETA campaign. And then it
Right.
makes me think, okay, is it going to take third party regulations, or is it going to take countries or whatever it may be? It's interesting because, okay, so Denmark didn't ban fur, but basically they got rid of all of their fur farms. This is mostly due to the context of coronavirus, according to this Vanity Fair article called I'm Only a Mink Killer, How COVID Caused Denmark's Historic Fur Industry Disaster. And this was published November 19th, 2020. So very recently. Basically, Denmark is known as one of the world's largest exporters of mink fur. And due to a potentially dangerous mutation in the coronavirus, it was discovered to have the potential to jump from mink to humans. So as a response to this perceived threat, Denmark's government basically ordered the entire country's mink farms to be destroyed. And so up to 17 million animals were basically killed.
Oh my gosh. Wait, I wonder why they didn't just set them free.
They can contract COVID.
Spread it.
Yeah. And so basically for the owners of these mink farms, it's obviously personally and economically life-changing, but it's also creating downstream effects, right, within the fur industry, because it's threatening supply chains, it's affecting fur auctions, and then also it's allowing animal rights activists and luxury fashion insiders to wonder if the Danes will completely cut out of being in the business of fur.
But it's also interesting because in this WWD article, Dries Van Noten discusses how how it's kind of a double thing. He doesn't take a stance necessarily. He says, I'm drawn by the fact that you can now have fake fur, which is so good, so beautifully done. But he also says, for me, it's a double thing. You can say you don't want to be cruel to the animals, but you also have to know about the manufacturing of fake fur and the ethics and environmental factors surrounding that. So I guess even like with the Denmark example, you can see that being illustrated because the consequences of ending mink production, it was killing all those minks.
Yeah, and also all of these people who were involved in the industry for fur are now out of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely is affecting people in ways that we may not even realize. It just reminds me of the food industry so much, like how there really are like two sides to it, right? Like you can go and have soy products or meat replacements, but a lot of energy and water goes into producing soy and then also making like fake chicken nuggets and stuff like that. And they may also not even be the healthiest for you. But to some people, it's seen as better than eating animals. So I really do think it's up to personal choice. I just don't know if the world as a whole will take a stance.
Yeah, I'm looking at this Huffington Post article, Faux Fur is Made of Plastic and It's Not Helping the Environment by Julia Brucciolari. And it talks about how most faux fur is made from plastic, acrylic, modacrylic, and or polyester, and they're all forms of plastic, and they're made with chemicals derived from coal, air, water, petroleum, and limestone. So it's like you were saying, there's so much carbon emission involved in all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And these raw materials are melted down and spun like cotton candy into a fabric that's woven and has a texture similar to real fur. And so as a result, this plastic is usually not biodegradable. Even if it's labeled biodegradable, it can take hundreds of years to break down. And so the Huffington Post spoke to Mark Oten, the CEO of the International Fur Federation, who said he couldn't see how it's possible for a chemical-based product, aka faux fur, to be more sustainable than a natural-based product.
Yeah, no, definitely. If you had the option of having fur or faux fur, what have you done in the past, or what would you do?
Well, I do own Canada geese because they're really warm and they're supposed to be the best and they're supposed to have high quality. And I think that's definitely true. I've had mine for 4 years and they still are basically like brand new. When I dry clean them, they're as if they're brand new. And Canada Goose has that, it's like a warranty type policy where you can go in and fix it whenever you want, but I've never even had the need to go in and fix it.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I don't really wear fur. I don't even wear leather, which when this WWD article, Donatella Versace she makes different statements for leather versus fur. And she says Versace is trying to find ways to make leather more sustainably produced.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a completely different conversation.
Yeah, no, definitely. For myself, I also have Canada geese for exactly the same reasons. I think they're some of the warmest coats. I also think the fur that's actually on them is also utile. Like you can, like I've always put the hood up and then the fur can, if it's snowing or something, it protects your face from the wind and the snow.
Yeah, I agree. And also the fur that they use on the hoods, it's water resistant.
Yes, exactly. And I think like that's one big thing. Like Canada geese are super warm. Like Montclairs are warm, but they're not as water resistant.
Hmm.
I also have definitely invested in leather. I think for myself, like leather shoes particularly. I'm a sweaty person, so leather is really important for me because it's breathable and it's
Hmm.
really comfortable. And with wear and the heat from your feet, like they kind of mold to your feet. And I know
Hmm.
there are definitely other materials, but if you can only use one material versus a ton of synthetic materials, I think that's almost more worth it to me because I know that my feet are going to be able to breathe and it's going to be more comfortable and they'll wear with time, but almost in a good way.
Hmm.
I also do have some leather jackets, and it's the same thing. Like, I've owned my one leather jacket, it was my 16th birthday present, and I've pretty much worn it every single year since, and it's one of the best investments. It still basically looks brand new. I actually went to a thrift store today and found one for 20 bucks. It's like a huge kind of tattered like men's leather jacket, but it looks great. It's super warm and it's probably so old and it's still going to be able to be used today because I think the material lasts that long.
Hmm.
So I definitely use fur, but I do understand the implications of it. Like I do not think there's enough visibility on what actually goes into the fur industry, and that would be interesting to see as consumers do want to know more about how their products are made or where materials are sourced if that's going to be a change that we see in the fashion industry in the
Hmm.
future.
Right. And with leather as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
definitely.
kind of interesting because I think when it comes to, for a lot of designers, stance is, oh, won't go fur less, but we'll just make sure to ethically source our fur. So I guess
Mhm.
there are other ethical implications that you can abide by without having to completely give up the promise of quality and also luxury slash status that I think inevitably comes with purchasing animal products.
Yeah, definitely. I do think some of the like social connotations towards faux fur has definitely changed in recent years. Like I do think people are more apt to buy it and aren't embarrassed to wear it, but
Hmm.
there definitely are antiquated traditions and cultures. Like I think about women on the Upper East Side who definitely still wear their furs.
Mm. Well, also, I've been living in LA for the past year, so I guess I don't really see people wearing fur. So it's really just kind of a geographic thing. People do wear leather though.
Yeah.
Well, excellent discussion today, Otis. I love our seminar styles.
I know. I really feel like when we are both prepared and reading different articles, I feel like I get to know a lot more perspectives that I may not have found previously. For some
Hmm.
of our listeners at home, we actually source our own articles and then bring them to each other and then discuss them. So I'll look into some things and Catherine will look into others, and that's how we make it what it is.
Yes. I know that I like doing the podcast when I talk about it later in the week. Like, I'm like, did you know? Blah, blah, blah. Because it will inevitably come up because it's in my mind.
Yes, definitely. If someone is ever like, oh, what you learned this week, now you know more about the fur industry.
Earlier this week, Zita said instead of going on TikTok so much, I should read case studies or something. So these will be my new facts.
It's okay. I support your TikTok content creation. All right.
Oh,
Well, that was a great conversation. Definitely some fascinating thoughts. And I'm interested to see if we're going to see more visibility and transparency about how materials sourced from animals are actually made.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's all for now, folks. Do 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 do.
Hey.